Thank you for coming tonight to hear our stories. I doubt that anyone here is unaware of what happened on December 14, 2012 at Sandy Hook Elementary School. I would like to share what happened in my class in Newtown Middle School in another building. December 14th started out like any other Friday in Newtown. My 7th graders filtered into my science room, excited to try their hand at microscopes for the first time. At about 9:20, I heard the secretary page the principal. My heart took an extra beat because the principal is never paged school-wide except in an emergency. And then it happened. The principal announced that we were in a lockdown. That became the beginning of a 3-hour communication shutdown in our school. No public announcements, no phones, no talking, and no sounds, just silence. My students, like typical 13-year-olds, rolled their eyes at me, inferring that it was just another dumb drill. Regardless, they did exactly as we had practiced. They sat bunched up against the wall, away from all windows and doors without a peep, while I walked into the open hallway and locked my 2 doors and checked the bathroom for students that were missing. We sat silently in my classroom, not easy task for 13-year-olds, especially those in my class who had special needs. Within 10 minutes, the distant sounds began. The air was filled with sirens from fire trucks, police cars, and ambulances for over 30 minutes. The kids and my 2 teacher aides watched my face, looking for answers. I kept a poker face and told my students what a good job they were doing. Protocol for lockdown at that time was that even teachers' cell phones needed to be off. Instinct told me that I needed to find out what's happening. So in an effort to keep my students safe, I broke protocol. I crawled behind my desk, away from the eyes of my students and 2 teacher aides, and checked my vibrating cell phone. It was lit up with multiple texts. From my own grown children, my husband, concerned family and friends, and my sister, a retired teacher, was texting over and over again, frantically asking me to text her. She texted that there had been a shooting at Sandy Hook, and in addition, she stated that the police think there may be another shooter headed to other schools. I texted back my sister that I was safe and asked her to keep me updated on the situation. I crawled back to my students and thanked them one more time for being so good. And then the helicopter started buzzing. Our school, as they headed for Sandy Hook, just a few miles away, it felt like I was in a war zone. My students' teenage faces went from bored to afraid. As we waited, I broke my personal rules again. I lied to my students when they asked me what was going on. I said I was not quite sure, but from the sounds outside, I told them in a whisper that we were really in a lockdown. I asked my students to find a happy place in their heads and heart and to go there now. As I prayed silently to God to protect us, I looked at the 22 little anxious faces and said to them, if you find comfort in prayer or meditation, this would be a good time to use those tools to relax. I told them I would do everything in my heart to keep them safe. This time, their eyes did not roll. Minutes turned into hours, and it became eerily quiet outside. Along the way, I learned from my sister that the principal of Sandy Hook, a colleague and friend who I knew well, had died along with many children. This was hard for me to hear and not cry, but I could not fall apart in front of my students and teacher aides. The tears would come later. I looked at my students and knew that 1/4 of them went to Sandy Hook Elementary School, and many of them had younger siblings there. After 90 minutes, some of my students nervously whispered that they really needed to go to the bathroom and they were hungry and thirsty. And then the lockdown was over. The lockdown had lasted about 3 hours. Although the lockdown was difficult and unsettling for me and my students, my Sandy Hook colleagues experienced a nightmare situation that no child or teacher should ever have to be a part of. All of the teachers, students, and staff did their very best to stay safe. 6 Sandy Hook teachers lost their lives protecting their students, and 20 first graders were murdered. Our lives at Newtown would never be the same again. The Newtown community had lost 20 children and 6 educators. The days that followed were filled with overwhelming sadness. In the aftermath of the tragedy, it was hard to adjust. Newtown became the home for hundreds of reporters trying to get the story straight. The halls of our schools became filled with comfort dogs, social workers, school psychologists, and spiritual leaders. Everyone wanted to help us. During my Christmas vacation in 2012, I spent a lot of time with God while I snowshoed the mountains of New Hampshire looking for answers. First, I made the most important decisions of my life. I would teach until the end of the school year in June 2014. Second, school violence was becoming too commonplace, and this raised many more issues in my mind that I needed to address. In my heart, I believe that something must be done about the culture of violence that our children now live in. I came tonight to share just a small part of my story with you, giving just a snapshot. It's not easy for me to tell the story. It is difficult to describe what we have endured and continue to struggle with in our Newtown community. As you sit here and listen, I can look into your eyes, and I know that many of you are thinking that this will never happen in my community, in my school, to my children, to my grandchildren. But since Sandy Hook, we have heard of far too many school shootings. My fear is that people will get used to these reports. Every time that I hear about another school shooting, my heart breaks some more. We have to do something to stop this epidemic of violence in our society. There is something that you can do. You can speak out against gun violence. Gathering here tonight in prayer is a good first step. Speak out by joining the Rhode Island Coalition Against Gun Violence. Tell your public officials that you have had enough. We can stop this together. We have to. Thank you.